invite the panelists to come on stage. I'll call them in various order as I remember the names. Preet Dupar of BBC Global News. T.M. Veer Raghav, senior journalist. Maya Sharma of NDTV. Columnist Akar Patel. Ravi Hegde of Group Editor of Udayawani. Anant Chiniva of Suvarna News. Mr. Raghunath from IIM Bangalore, please. These are all eminent people who have great achievers in their own fields, and most of us here are journalists. And I'll do a one-line introduction of each speaker and suggest a topic that they speak on that we have already discussed before. You know, most of us write about business and revenue models and such, even if we don't understand it fully. But here we have Preet Dupar, who comes from a strong finance, accounting, background. She's the chief operating officer in India of BBC Global News, and we will start with her. Everyone will speak for 2 or 3 minutes first, and then we can take a second round, and hopefully there'll be some time for maybe a couple of questions only, though. I'm requesting Preet Dupar to talk about the present state of the art in the way our channels, our newspapers, all our publications, ownership, online media, the way global ownership, global distribution, content generation, content sharing happens in the world, and specifically in India, where are we headed? With this confusion about the new regimes, of administration. Thank you.
Thank you. See, I'm not familiar with speaking as I sort of sit on the business side of things. I'm going to try and actually talk on some broad business issues here, because there is already a very esteemed panel of journalists sitting here to talk about content. Prakash also asked me to speak on the regulatory, regime. And I'll try and bring in some global perspective as well. And I think first of all, we should actually, and particularly coming from a channel that operates across the world, one thing that we must applaud in India is freedom of press, because it does not exist in all jurisdictions. So, however much we may criticize news media in India, I think the freedom of press is definitely to be appreciated and celebrated, and that's what calls for a very vibrant media market. There aren't any regulatory restrictions really, except for the fact that there are restrictions on foreign broadcasters to have majority stake in India, and a restriction that has been existing for a long time, which is not allowing news on FM. So those are two which is not specific to foreign broadcasters. Nobody can do news on FM, and those definitely are two restrictions which I think everybody in the news market hopes, will, as the market matures, will dilute, over a period of time. Coming specifically to the television news market in India, now, it's not an easy market to operate in. I think it is a tough business model, because monetization of the content from a distribution perspective is almost negligible. And you're practically dependent only on advertising revenue. And that's why, the topic of today's conversation saying, the number one, the fight for number one in the dizzying news landscape. And, no wonder ratings are as awaited as Sachin Tendulkar's next century. Everybody wants them. And the problem with, and if you actually look at global news channels across the world, they have a healthy mix of distribution and advertising revenue as their business models. Now, with digitization coming, Prakash spoke about the new regime. I think that change will happen, but I don't see that happening in a hurry in India. One major thing that needs to change is that people in India are not used to paying for content. So content monetization, whether on television, whether online, I think is a difficult task. And one of the tasks that we have to do as an industry is change the consumer mindset. People have the capacity to pay in India. No one's saying that we want to charge people who cannot pay or people cannot afford. Nobody wants to charge those people, but there are enough people in India who can afford to pay for quality content. We are sitting today in, one of the most posh hotels, and the conference is being held here. The luxury market in India, is actually doing very well. So there is no reason that people in India should not get used to or not be willing to. I think people are willing to pay. There's a bit of a political play here also in trying to, keep prices constant, and therefore you have TRAI actually putting restrictions on how much can somebody charge, cable operator charge a consumer, or how much can, X person charge Y person, and those are things that that need to go away. But like I said, I don't see that happening, in a hurry. So we pretty much go back to sort of a square one where we are advertising led. So let's come back to everybody's favorite topic, which is audience measurement systems, which I'm sure you've all read, hot topic of debate, everywhere. The problem is that news, even if you put it into two segments, you have regional news, you have English news, you have business news, you have Hindi news. It caters to such a diverse range of audiences. So even if you pick up, let's just say, English news, every news service provider will have their set of audiences. There will be something unique that every news service provider is doing, and each of them will have their set of audiences, and it is possible to target those audiences, and therefore provide sort of a specific kind of target audience to the advertiser, but our audience measurement systems don't actually cater to differentiated audiences at all. So we have this, if I may use a Hindi word here, a pot of khichdi where we put everything together, and someone's supposed to be number one out of that khichdi. It just cannot work, like that. That I think is completely unnecessary pressure on the news channels to constantly prove themselves, in this regime. So that's the challenge. And then if I look at the global markets, there are audience surveys that cater to differentiated segments. So I don't know if you've heard of Mendelssohn's affluence survey, and there's facts. And while I'm talking about affluent surveys, those are sort of not the only ones. There are, let's say, in the US market, a survey that deals with Spanish audiences. The point is, at this stage in India, those kind of surveys do not find acceptance in the advertising community. So your trading currency is not, either a PAX or anything else. Your trading currency at the moment is pretty much limited to, what it is, and therefore we sort of create, this hodgepodge. So if you've got an environment here which already is a bit unsteady in terms of, audience measurement systems, add to that the one fact that you cannot ignore, and that is changing across the world, changing even more rapidly in India, is the way people consume news. Today, people want news when they want to see it, what they want to see, on the device that they want to see. Add that to the mix, and measurement becomes, a total confusion. How are you going to measure, across all the scenes? And I'm not saying that linear TV viewing will go down. It will not. In fact, TV viewing per se, with the number of devices increasing, will increase. And each of them complement each other. But the point is, how do you come up with a measurement system that actually measures all of these together? Even in advanced economies like the US, advanced media markets like the US, the industry is actually crying out for innovation in the audience measurement systems, because in today's date, the measurement systems that exist even in the US appear to be old-fashioned. Now you look at a market like India where, we've got a very young population. I call that, an online generation. I have a 14-year-old daughter who's constantly on an iPad, on an iPhone, and that's where they're consuming news. That's where they're consuming content, most of the time. And you just cannot ignore that plot at all. So I think when we're defining the number one, to define it only in the context of TV in today's date does not make sense. We do have an opportunity as an industry with BARB, which is the, who are trying to come up with a new audience measurement system. We do have the opportunity to actually catch up with the trends and ensure that those trends are incorporated in the way we look at our audiences. But, it's going to be really hard work, and it's going to be even more confusing. But as I said, it's a vibrant industry. It's one of the reasons people join this industry and stay on forever, because change is a constant, and we've got to deal with that.
Thank you very much. Maybe we'll have to come back to you, because I'm going to take only 3 issues from the wide spectrum of things that you've addressed now. I'll leave digitalization out, except to see the first problem of a differentiated market and how can we actually cater or function harmoniously with a differentiated market. The second one is actually, are we willing to pay for our content? Then some of this mess could be could be addressed differently, because there is no such thing as a free television or free newspapers. You're paying for it by other means, but it's not evident to you. So, and the third thing is audience measurement systems. And I don't know if any of the panelists can say it, so I'm going to say it. The thing is that, that NDTV went to court over the measurement system, and it went to court in New York. And the problem there is advertising agencies which are served, at least I don't know, they seem to be served well by the system that is in operation now. Also own the rating agencies is a very troubling situation for us. So I'm going to turn to Veer Raghav, who's done 10 years of television journalism in the north. He's put in a stint as senior editor of CNN IBN in charge of the south, and now he's for the moment free and free to speak, I'm hoping. So what does this TAM mean? And all the channels threatened to back out of it, then they went back, and where are we now? Actually, it seems really messy.
Having been in a panel before with Prakash, I was sort of, I know what I was walking into, so sort of got my Google open here. So, I just want you to, as you're asking me this, I just go into MRUC's website, which is the agency which does the Indian readership survey. Let's not get into television at the moment, in the first 2 minutes of the 3 minutes that I have. We just talk about print. The key intent of the MRUC is capturing relevant information on growing media and product ownership and consumption based on industry needs. The user for the media is the advertiser. That's how the fundamental genesis of entire readership or any survey goes, because it's the advertiser who funds that entire exercise. It's the advertiser who wants to know where he can put his money. And this is not a problem that we're discussing today. It happened in the United Kingdom in the 18th century, when the radical press, which led to the rise of the Labour Party, and it's been beautifully documented by Stanton and Curran in their essay, which has been quoted extensively in Noam Chomsky's propaganda model, so much so that advertising pressure, according to Noam Chomsky in his propaganda model, is one of the main filters which imposes pressures on news. Now, what they argue is very simple. Readership is important. What good is a journalist without a reader? What good is a panel without a topic to discuss? What good is a moderator without panelists? That's as good a journalist is without a reader. But the question is, when you have an advertiser wanting to find out your reader, then the advertiser wants to find the demography and the geography of that particular type of reader who has the purchasing power to buy something. All right? So if your yardstick for news is going to be reaching to that particular type of reader who has the money to spend, then the entire concept of assessing readership or viewership becomes flawed from a journalistic point of view, but it becomes right from an advertiser's point of view. So why is there this problem? This problem exists because, again, we go back to the 18th century onwards. It's nothing new. When at one point of time, newspapers were funded purely by donations of people who were readers or patrons of that newspaper. You take India or the UK or any other country, for example, The cost of publishing a newspaper was much less. Then the Industrial Revolution came out. The cost of publishing a newspaper went higher. People could not generate that much revenue from just the readers alone. So they went into, and then the advertisers and the capitalist free market economy takes over to a large extent, where advertising becomes the key source of revenue. And Preet has already pointed that out. The question of monetizing content is something that is confronted. But it's just not about paying for news, because when you talk about paying for news, you mean that those who can't pay can't get their news. So it's not as simple as we say that as long as I have a bunch of subscribers, then I'm going to be able to get over the pressures of delinking from TRP and IRS. No, it's not that simple. Because even then, you're going to be producing news for a set of population which can afford to buy the news. Right? So the question is that when you're measuring audience, whether it is for television, print or radio, who is going to be doing that exercise? Is the reader willing to fund to ensure that he is part of that exercise to determine how many readers are actually there? Is the newspaper willing to do it? Is the state willing to do it? Is the citizenry willing to get involved in that? So it's not just enough for a few citizens who can afford to pay for news if you want news to be delinked from the concept of TRPs and advertisements. It's important for the citizenry who have the purchasing power to actually fund a news exercise for the entire population of the country. And only then you're going to be able to delink from this. It's already happening in some forms in the YouTube. If you go into the YouTube, there are shows like The Young Turks, which is shown some kind of revenue model where people are willing to subscribe for a particular show in the United States, where they're willing to buy it and they're able to make money, and that money gets reinvested in the process of content. So yes, as long as the news is not a free commodity, the reader understands that the news is not a free commodity, you're not going to be able to delink from IRS. But I go one step further. As long as the reader understands that news for the entire society cannot be a free commodity and not just for himself, news will continue to be linked with readership surveys and TRPs. How you get out of this trap, when you get out of this trap, is I think anybody's guess. But speaking honestly about it, every news channel, you can talk of ethics, you can talk of great values, but at the end of the day, without money, no journalist is willing to work. All right? I mean, he needs a salary. You need the money to produce news. So how are you going to go about the process of bringing that money in? At the moment, as Preet was saying, it's only advertisers, especially in India. The amount of advertising money that's going into news channels is just sort of offsets. In fact, distribution is considered a cost rather than a revenue source. Advertising is the only revenue source. And remember that it's the advertiser who's funding the entire rating. Whatever ratings you see, and Prakash, just one quick point, he was speaking about NDTV taking the TAM to court. All broadcasters walked out of TAM. It's not because they wanted to hold up great journalism. It's because their argument was that TAM was keeping the ratings low because ad rates would be low. So it's purely a business battle. It was no great ethical journalistic battle that anyone was fighting about taking on TAM. Every broadcaster wants that rating system. Every broadcaster wants that rating system because every broadcaster is in it for a business, and don't expect them to not be in it for a business. You as the reader want the news free. You as the reader want entertainment. You as the reader want a particular kind of approach towards news. The broadcaster will give you that. So, only point that I increasingly become convinced about is that, and I go back to Mahatma Gandhi on this, it may be old-fashioned, but the only way you're going to bring about a change with the news system and delink it from TRPs and IRS is to bring about a social change, about a sense of importance to news as a society. And until that happens, you'll continue to get the news you deserve. And that's purely my own personal belief. And since I don't have a channel to report to at the moment, a journalist who is jobless, so I can be a little more honest about it because I don't have to get fired from someplace. So I guess that's about it.
So thank you, Veer. We are fortunate
That I don't have a job.
to have another non-journalist on the panel. So I'm going to step back a little from Veer Raghav's rather ruthless angle on it, because, see, he's saying, Mahatma Gandhi published 7 newspapers, 7 publications. You shouldn't call them newspapers. And there's no gainsaying that he could reach India. So there must be a higher purpose of news delivery. News happens, nobody needs to do that. But news to be delivered, there should be a higher purpose, I think. And I'm going to ask Dr. S. Raghunath because we are too much in it maybe, journalists, to tell us if there is shouldn't there be a public broadcasting or public print service of some nature for a country as diverse as India with so many diverse needs, where nobody is willing to pay for bad news, for instance, right? So what should we do, you think?
You see, if you look at this population distribution across various groups, our country, as all of us know, comparatively is a very young country. And if you see here, the projections starting all the way down from 2000 to 2015, you find starting from the 15 to 30-year bracket, and then if you look at 30 to 50-year, it's a steady thing, but it's the 15 to 30-year bracket, which is very interesting. So as professionals who've lived their lives through news, they made some very excellent points. So it's all about the consumer. And the consumer profile in India is distinctly the ones who open a newspaper earlier liked the newsprint on their fingers, and they feel that their life is incomplete if they don't start the day with a newspaper. And there are these young guys, including your son and my daughter and many others, who would like to see that on a smartphone or any small screen and talk about it but not pay for it. Right? So this is